Hello and welcome to FPL IQ, where today we're going to be giving everyone a big warm hug in a mug because we're going to be going through how to deal with a bad game week. Then we're going to go on to when to hold and when to ditch a potentially misfiring player. Game week matchups with the North London derby. We've got Liverpool and West Ham, and we've got a potentially, well, it will be underlooked because no one really cares about it except Lucian, who's with us today, as it is his Wolves side against Luton. Of course, they're in our vision because of the double game week coming up. We'll be reviewing our 4-week game week player picks. So every game week we choose a player we think is solid for the next 4 game weeks, and today's the first day we review our picks from the first one this season before making the picks for this week and looking very briefly at Captaincy. So I'm joined by FPL Planner AU, which is of course Tien, and Lucian, who is teacher _FPL. Lucian, how are you doing today?
Well, it hasn't been a bad game week. I mean, if everyone suffers a massive red arrow, shouldn't we all be in the same boat? I mean, who's celebrating? I opened my Twitter timeline and I literally see nobody celebrating any sort of score. You know, unless you see this big content creator go, okay, give me your worst, show me your team if you have more than 40 points. Then you see all the replies pop up. But otherwise, no one's really showing off their scores. So if everyone's lamenting, then no one's really suffered, right?
I agree with that. It just feels like everyone's got a red arrow, and I don't know how anyone's got a green. But it felt like you were 9 million in the world if you got 30, and you were 3 million in the world if you got 31. You know, it wasn't a good week for all. But sometimes that's one of the things we'll talk about of how to get over a bad game week, right? And it's, you're looking at your team with a lot of 1s and 2s and maybe 1 goal in your whole team, but you got to sort of look on the bigger picture, right? And of course Tien is with us as well. Tien, how are you doing? Feeling good?
Yeah, good. I think it's a good week to have a bad week, right? So everyone on the same boat. I think a lot of us are in the 9 million plus game week rank. So I don't know. I think my rough estimate is that we've got about 300,000-400,000 active managers on Twitter, and we all on the same boat, more or less. So there we are.
So yeah, we had some sticky points there. Ryan's not here with us again because he's off and about. I've just come back from the doctor, so people might not hear me talk as much today because of my throat. And then we were having trouble with cameras. I'll just put on stream the picture I was going to have to go with Lucian's face. This is what I was going to have to go with in his position. We'll leave that in the middle for now because it's so nice. But he got his camera working, so that was one positive we've had for the start of this game week. And we'll just on the screen, I've also put the league table because now we've got 5 games under our belts. We're starting to see a little bit of a shape to the Premier League. It's still too early, but just a little bit of a peak. We'll go in then to how to deal with a bad game week. Let me just take Lucian's happy face off the screen. How to deal with a bad game week. So I've already touched on this when I've said when everyone's had a pretty bad game week like game week 5, you don't really lose a lot. So when it's one that you've had a stinker, so I have put this in the notes about this isn't just this game week, but it's one to talk about because a lot of people have been a bit disheartened by this week, is to think of the times when you do have a bad one and other people don't. And, you see a lot of angry posts or sad posts or people saying they're quitting or beating themselves up a bit about it. So one of the tips that I would say is look at it as a challenge. Just remember it's a game. And I know it's easier to just say that, but see it as a challenge to how are you going to get back? It's like a game of football, right? If you go 1-0 down, you don't just say, oh, this is difficult, I can't come back. It's a 38 game, right? FPL is a 38 game week thing that you play. It's not over in 1 week. How many times do you see people who start the season in the top 1 million and finish 9 million? How many times do you see people after Christmas being 5 million and finishing in the top 100 or 50k? It's definitely not over. Just sort of keep your head and keep on going. I mentioned that I see this that if it's really bothering you, step away. So I have a problem that when I play FIFA, the football game, and it's it's Foot Champions on the weekend, and I've qualified for it. And when I'm happy, when I'm fine, and things aren't going my way, I'm not bothered when I'm losing the games. But when I lose a goal, or I make a foul, or I don't get the result I wanted, and I start getting angry, that's when it's time that I know something else is wrong. It's not FIFA that's making me angry. It's not FPL that's getting to me. So trying to find the root of the problem, because I don't think you're really sad because of FPL, or like with me and FPL and FIFA. I think it's because the fact that something else is getting to you, not that. So maybe try again and look at the bigger picture. But just see that it's a game. So when I go down in a game of FIFA, I change my tactics. I bring subs on, right? You make a change. Do that when it's not going your way in FPL. And no one cares more about your rank than you. You are the only one who actually cares about what rank you are. So if it really has gone to a stage where it's affecting your mental health and you're actually sad, you can either just step away, don't play it, or have a few days away, close the app, delete the app, and then reinstall it the day before deadline. Or really play it your own way. If you're not having fun with how FPL is supposed to be played, play it your own way. Change the game. Make it a new game. I've said before, when people said, right, it's over, I'm just going to do stupid things, take hits. Yeah, do that. Or do things like make a London team where you can only have Premier League players from London clubs, or England FC where you just have English players in there and see how it goes. If you're not having fun with the game that's set in front of you, make your own game. They were just some things for me. But if it is affecting your mental health, it's probably not FPL. It's probably time to step back and have a look at what is causing the root of that problem. Tien, what's your advice for how to deal with a bad game week?
Yeah, I think the first step is to acknowledge that having a bad FPL game week can actually affect your emotions. But just admit that that is happening, rather than dismiss it or ignore it. I think this is because we invest so much in it. A lot of us invest so much time and effort into the game. And generally, for everything else, right, the more time and effort you invest in something, the better you get at it. Playing a sports or a chess game or something, right? But it's not FPL generally. So I think it's important to realize that there are so many things in FPL that are outside of our control. How a player or a team performs. There's unexpected injuries, unexpected benchings. There's VAR, the weather, COVID, the Queen's passing, like all of the things that happen that are completely out of our control. And so I think, try to focus on the things that we can control. I think that's a good place to start. And then maybe ask yourself, like, why do you play the game in the first place? What is important to you? What brings you enjoyment playing this game? And it's different for everyone, right? For some people, it will probably to get consistently high overall rank, for example. If that's the case, then maybe you have to play the game in a certain way. You may have to prioritize, long-term strategy. You may have to stay patient. And sometimes you may have a bad week, but you can't really, knee-jerk too much because, you have to play the long game. And you may not be able to get on like, shiny new toys, for example. Sometimes that is the thing that frustrates people because they can't do the thing that they want to get enjoyment out of the game. But sometimes you've got to sacrifice if you want to play the long game and overall ranks is important to you. But for some people, they don't care about overall ranks, for example. They want to be maverick. They want to enjoy picking players on the weekly basis that no one has, for example, or just go differential with a captaincy pick. And they get that weekly wins out of it, and they enjoy that. But then obviously with that, the overall rank may suffer, and you might need to be okay with that. So I like listening to the FML FPL podcast, right? I think it's a brilliant podcast, and and Walsh has been taking hits every week this season because that's the way he plays. I find it hilarious. I love it. And I applaud him for playing that way because he's found enjoyment in doing that. Just chasing points, taking hits every week to bring in players he wants. So yeah, there's no right or wrong way to play FPL. I think Lucian mentioned it the other week, right? Playing it your own way is very important to maximize enjoyment in this game. But I would stress that you need to know what your way is and try to stick with it. Something that I have mentioned previously as well. So perhaps have some sort of a goal to start with at the start of the season. What do you want to get out of this? So for example, if you play for overall rank, right, you might have a target of like, okay, I want to be a top 10k finish by the end of the season, which is fine. You set the goal at the start, but then it's probably important to think about that whether you need to adapt along the way. If you are way off it now, is that still realistic? Right? Maybe it could be because it's a long way to go, but maybe just readjust. Just focus on, let's say, okay, if I don't know, let's say if I'm at the 2 or 3 million rank right now, it may seem very far away from top 10k. But maybe just readjust that. Maybe try to set realistic expectations, right? Not only just the season long expectations, but the expectations every single game week as well. So for me personally, I often know whether I might have a bad game week before it happened, because I know what players I have and which players I don't have, and based on sort of my predictions of effective ownerships and the matchups and all that, I kind of know what to expect going into the game week. So I often set my expectation lower, so that when it happened, I generally don't get too disappointed. And I think that's a good way, just expect disappointment, then then you can't be disappointed, right? It might have come from Spider-Man or something.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
Um, and then after a bad week, ask yourself, if you are angry, why are you angry? If you're sad, why are you sad? Is that because you picked a player or you picked your captain that didn't return as they should? And then maybe ask yourself, is that because I picked the wrong player, or because I picked the right player but I was unlucky? You got to be really honest with yourself here, right? Don't blame others, or don't even blame things as well. Like there's no point sort of going over like, oh, that VAR decision was unfair. I could have got that goal, and my captain should have returned. Blah blah blah. There's no point pondering about those things that are completely out of our control, right? Think about your pick. If your pick was a mistake, which we make mistake all the time, then maybe think about how you can improve the way you pick players so that you can avoid making the same mistake in the future. But on the other hand, if you believe your picks were solid and you're just unlucky because of things that are unexpected, or someone miss a pen, like that's it's something that you can't predict, right? Then just stick with it. Stick with your plan. I think the worst thing you could do after a bad outcome is to make a rage transfer when your emotions are still high, especially like right after the game, before the game week's finished, because I think it's more likely that you'll make more mistakes doing that. Trust me, I've done it. I've done it plenty of time in the past. I think a very good example a couple of years ago when remember that double game week, like picking between Ronaldo and Bruno Fernandes. So I went into the game week pretty much sure that I would do Son to Fernandes before I went to sleep, but then I decided to not do it and wake up at 4 or 4:30 a.m. in the morning or something for the deadline to hear the news that Ronaldo potentially fit. Then I took a -4 to get Ronaldo and another midfielder instead. And obviously the swing was massive, right? I think it's 42-point swing or something, because I could have gone Bruno, but I didn't. And then so I was basically, rage transfer Ronaldo. I took another -4 to reverse those moves and guess who I got in? Dennis for the following double game week, and then of course he destroyed
right?
my got red card at the first game and then completely destroyed my game week. So that 2 game weeks in a row I made sort of back-to-back mistakes, and by trying to fix mistakes I make more mistakes. But anyway, it happens all the time. So I think it's important to realize that doing rage transfer when your emotions are high is generally not a good idea. And as you said, it may be a good idea to take some time out if you're really emotional. Like, get off Twitter, don't look at your team for a day or two, or even a few days. Don't listen to content, just or maybe listen to content that make you feel better. There's a couple of podcasts that only focus on making you better rather than the normal content that you normally listen to, or just go do something else. Twitter can be really triggering after a bad game week, especially when you are the only one or only few who had a bad game week. I think Twitter can be a pretty bad place. So and then come back when you're a bit calmer and objectively reassess your plan or make a new plan without that rage. Even without a bad game week, I often find that consuming too much FPL content and spending too much time on Twitter would be draining as well, because you're just constantly in that sort of cycle of thinking about,
cycle.
And then negative, and then it generally lead to like overthinking and doing things that you shouldn't do anyway. And I think finally, just think about, FPL is a game, right, where a lot of us come to find enjoyment. Like, it's just, being here talking to you guys is the enjoyment that I get out of FPL. It doesn't matter what points I get, right? It's part of it. But if it's becoming stressful, where you can't just find enjoyment, then maybe consider taking a break, or at least restrain from certain aspects that cause you that grief. And then reassess when you feel that you want to enjoy that again. So those are a few, some of the few things that I found myself doing in the last couple of years that really helps now. Like, pretty much every week, if I got a bad game week, I generally feel pretty calm about, because I kind of have these certain strategies in place to deal with it.
Yeah, great. Lucian, how do you suggest dealing with a bad game week? Because you had a tough start to this season, right? Because was it a -8 you took in game week 3 or something like that?
Well, the -8 doesn't concern me too much. It's just, to be honest, my rank doesn't concern me too much. To be honest, I'm just more frustrated that I'm making the same mistakes, some of the same mistakes that may have been avoidable, but looking back, I still don't regret those mistakes, and I'm okay with that. It's a risk-reward thing. So I'm going to address the topic at the moment, and I think I'm going to draw from a wider pool of philosophy, because in the end, the points that we all make are going to be just about the same. And the first being, fall back on what you can control. Like, Twitter isn't the only social media I use, right? I do the whole desk scroll on Twitter. I do it on Instagram. I do it on TikTok. And for Instagram, I've come across this particular page called Reminders Perfect. And they put philosophies in such a simple way that it's impossible to ignore. And one of the most prominent things that kept popping up for me this week is that we think that we are the main characters of our story. And we think that other people feel the same way and they view the same thing. When in actual fact, we are just side characters in everyone's stories. We are all just side characters in each other's stories. And the same goes for FPL. We're all just side characters. There's no main character in FPL. And in the end, the game can frustrate you, the points can frustrate you, but people make you happy. Across the week, yeah, FPL sucked, the points sucked, but the day, the whole day after Forest Burnley ended, I go to school, I see my students, and we all talk about who won and who lost in our mini leagues. And we just have all that banter and we talk shit about each other online and in real life, and we talk about, how do I beat you next round? Oh, let's take down the league leader. Oh, you're at the bottom. Oh, you had a good win. Fantastic. You beat a teacher. Yes. Well done. You beat a teacher. And that is enjoyable, the people that you interact with. I come home from school and I just look at my wife and my children and they make me happy more than FPL, more than anything else, more than the work and the research that I put into my work. And then I look forward to Tuesday where I speak to Gabrielle and Chris on Net Hall. And then I look forward to seeing you guys on Thursday as well as everyone that shows up on live chat. So you control the ecosystem you create for yourself. And that includes the content you consume, because as weird as it sounds, you do not control the content that you listen to. You cannot control what Walsh will say on FML, FPL. You cannot control what the big content creators will recommend you next week. It's out of your control. So why are you frustrated by their picks, even though you listen to them and those were the best pick possible, right? Those are all beyond your control. So what you can control is identifying whether you've made a mistake. A very good analogy is watching your own recordings. Have you guys watched your own? I mean, we regularly watch our own recordings, so we tend to be our biggest self-critics, right? But I'm pretty sure FPL managers rarely look at their progress, they watch their decision-making, and they write it down. There are very few managers that actually went, I picked this player because this. They very rarely write it down. And this is the period where you look through your previous game weeks and I picked Johan Wissa in game week 3. Oh, there he is. So, did that come good? No. Did I cut my losses? Yes. I sold Johan Wissa even though he had 2 more good fixtures. I bought Julian Alvarez. That paid off. So, this is the kind of decision that you have to make and examine and course correct as soon as possible. Because the sooner you confront your mistake, after you cool down and come back, the sooner you get good results. So it's all about controlling and having a good process and a good ecosystem that facilitates that process. So, and here's where things get really positive, right? Your upcoming strategy. Because if everyone has a bad game week, it means that everyone's going to be making emotional transfers. Everyone's going to be making potentially bad moves to catch up. And in that sense, you get to look at the current template. You get to look at who everyone owns as the most popular player. And you get to identify who are the true weaknesses and who are people letting go too soon. You have the choice of looking at the most owned player via live FPL or FPL.team, and you go, you know what? These guys are weaknesses, and these guys have been hanging around in my team for way too long. Let's get rid of them before everyone else does. Those are opportunities that you can make after Wednesday or Thursday after this stream tomorrow morning, where you get early team news. You just repeat the process and just do something a little bit different. Right? Attack the popular players, attack the template, and see what you can come up with next. The last thing I want to quote is something that I quote to my students as well, even though it's not very relevant to them. There's something that drunk college girls always live by. There's this one philosophy that applies to everybody all the way into adulthood. And it's those 4 famous words: this too shall pass. Anytime you've had a bad day, you've had a hangover on Monday morning or something like that, you just tell yourself, this too shall pass. Any red arrow will seem like a distant memory after 2 to 3 days.
Actually, it's a good song, that. It's a good song, that, as well. So just a couple of points in the chat. So going back to originally Paul Morrissey saying, like, a bad week for a lot of people. Always remember FPL is for fun. And we've got IPK Max, who's talked about FOMO. It always feels like if you're that kind of person, you're always going to have some kind of negativity because you're not going to get all the players that you want, and you need to accept that. There's always going to be a couple of players every game week who you want and they do well, and the one you have doesn't, and then you don't focus on the positive, you always focus on the negative. And Max has also mentioned about good decision making is more important than focus on the outcome, which is exactly what we do on this channel and exactly what we'll do when we do our 4-week game week picks. We've said it since the start. We're not that kind of channel that just looks at the points. We look at the decision making and how to improve as FPL managers, not just because of someone getting 20 points and in one game they got 19 of those 20 points because they had a crazy one match, right? Which links on to, I just want to mention keeping receipts, which is what we do here as well, which is what you talk about, Lucian, about learning from our mistakes. And we keep making the same mistakes because we don't look back at our thought process. We look back at our results, and that's the problem. We look at a player after 4 or 5 game weeks and they've not so me and Ed say, right, he's not got the points for me. So it would be easy for me to just sit here and say, I've got to sell him because he's not getting me points. But actually really look back as to why I started the season with him and what he's actually doing within the games, if you watch them, or within the data, and he's actually really, really good. It's just not happened. So I'm not angry about having likes of that. So I think some people just look at that, this is how many points, and not actually thinking about, how are they looking when you watch them? How are they doing on key stats and metrics? And that's why people make more rash decisions like rage transfers, which is what Tien's been talking about, and they don't learn from the mistakes, and then they keep having the same problem year in, year out, week in, week out. And just the final point before we finally move on is going back to Lucian's point about human interaction is everything. When you were talking about it, I just sat there and I thought, imagine, so my fun is chatting with people online, doing this with you guys. We have our Twitter chat that we all talk about. Like, you are my FPL chat for this. And I just thought human interaction is everything. Like, say we were not serious managers, right? And just like Lucian, you and your students or who and the co-workers or whatever, who have no idea about the whole metadata, they don't really even know what a double game week is. They have to ask you, what's a triple captain again? What's free hit? And they're probably ranked at like 5 or 6 million, but they're having so much more fun than people who are in the top 100k. Because they are playing the game against each other, not the world. We play a game against the world, and human interaction is everything. If I was in the top 100, obviously I'd be so happy, right? But if I've got no one to talk to about it, and I just post on Twitter and people say, oh yeah, good job, well done, or whatever. And I'm like, oh, anyone want to? No one talks to me. I don't have any friends. That sucks. But if you're in a group of, you're a group of mates, your co-workers, it's your Sunday football team. You'll have a league together. Whoever wins that league is like 5 million in the world, but he's the champion or she's the champion of that group. They will have had more fun than most of the people playing the game, because human interaction outside is better, but within FPL, who you talk to, who you watch, who you follow, who you listen to, that's what makes FPL fun. Not the game week 38, what is my digits next to my OR history, because that is not going to keep you happy for an entire season. So let's move on then to when to hold on or ditch a misfiring player. So of course we've got Jackson, who is in the fold here, because he's even trending on my Twitter about the Jackson and Alvarez situation right now. And it's funny, the picture I've got on screen, this is the opportunity Jackson had where he spooned it so far off target. I saw a funny video editing where they made the goal, like, how much bigger does the goal have to be for it to have been a goal? And it's something like, and they did loads of measurements for it. It's something like 350% bigger the goal had to be. And it's like 2 blue whales or like 18 people. Like, it was funny. Not funny for me because I've had him since game week 1. But this is he's obviously a key reason we're going to look at this, because there's people now, even with the fixtures, are starting to get a bit frustrated. I don't know how many times I've asked him to please stop talking to referees because he's going to get himself suspended. And that's the only reason I'm considering selling him, because I'm not bothered about Aston Villa. I do really want Jackson still for the 2 games after, but I'll be really frustrated if I have him for Villa, he gets booked in that game, and then he misses one of the 2 fixtures I really want him. But coming on to when to ditch or misfiring a player, patience is probably the most underrated ability, but one that most elite FPL managers have. So an elite manager is someone who consistently gets like a high rank, or maybe they have a large following because they're seen as or perceived to be very good at FPL. I've talked before about really analyzing who's coming in for the player that you're selling. So if I've made that move before, so when I talked about Eze earlier, I've likely analyzed and at least looked 4 game weeks into the future. So anyone coming in is very unlikely to leave within 4 matches in my FPL team, unless there's some other circumstance like they get injured or sold clubs or loaned out or something like that, right? If I'm selling a player without giving them at least 4 game weeks, I didn't do enough good due diligence, and that's on me. I made a mistake, and I've got to correct that, and I've got to own it and learn from it, which we talked about before. So when deciding who to bring in and how long to hold them, for me, it's always the eye test or just the eye test. I never purely look at data or stats. Stats like big chances or touches in the box can sometimes be misleading. So, for example, we all know the Kuna opportunity that he had against Liverpool, right? Where he didn't quite head it and he didn't quite knee it, and it was a golden chance, and he messed it up. It was a big opportunity, right? That is not on. That's not counted. I'm looking at the match history on Scout of positions and goal attempts on and off target, and that opportunity is not flagged on the map, right? So stats for me can sometimes be a little bit misleading. I've thought before about things like touches in the box. Haaland and historically Jamie Vardy, they were players that would score 2 goals in a game and have 2 touches in the box. Mo Salah is someone who dribbles a lot close to his body, and he might have 20 touches in a box because he's nifty on his feet, right? Compared to a striker who it's like first time, second time, smash it in the back of the net. So if I see a player with some good attacking metrics and I'm watching the game and they don't have an impact, I still won't get them. So it's never the data for me. The example we'll talk about is Jackson, who I've had all season. Stat-wise, he's right near the top in every key metric. He's still getting in behind. And even, I'll argue, from the eye test, he still looks involved. His teammates are still trying to find him with the final pass. They're not ignoring him or trying to go elsewhere. He still seems key every time Chelsea make an attack. This alongside fixtures. So I won't sell even a misfiring player who I still believe in if the fixtures are good. So I said before, he's got Villa, but then he's got Fulham and Burnley. So for me, it's a hard sell. I would only look at it if it was for that yellow card. So eye test, he's missing chances, yes, but he's active, he's getting in good positions, he's having chances, teammates are still finding him out, he's got good fixtures, good stats, good involvement. There's not a huge pool of players to even go to from Jackson. I could go to Alvarez, but I just don't think Jackson is a fire to put out. And I've put here as my final point, this could be Stockholm Syndrome at this point, because I'm with him and it's torture. It kind of feels like I'm being held hostage. But when it comes to misfiring players, eye test, stats, don't look at the final points. I think that's the key one. Yes, he's blanking. Yes, he's even getting yellow cards, so he's getting 1-pointers. But that doesn't necessarily mean he is a bad FPL option. Lucian?
Oh, sorry, I didn't know it was my turn. Okay, okay. I don't even know how to go about this because I made a huge table to actually analyze
tell you what, we'll go to TM first then, and then I'll put this table in now. So
yes, please, that would help a lot. Yeah.
Okay, so TM, we'll shoot over to you then.
All right. Yeah, no problem. I think a lot of my points is similar to yours, Rob. I think you touch on a very important point there. Is like don't use the point as a metric to to decide whether you want to hold or to sell a player, because that's not a very reliable metric at all. But as I mentioned before, right? People have different play styles. So the answer to this question depends a lot on how you play FPL as well. So obviously I can only answer this question based on how I play, which is generally about aiming for consistently high overall ranks. And this approach generally required patience, as he said. Which generally means that you give players enough time. 4 game week is a good amount of time in that regard. So for me, I think similar to what you said, it's the most important thing is to know why I brought someone in the first place. And after a bad performance, I'll ask myself if I made a mistake because the reason I selected that player were flawed to start with, or maybe the circumstances have changed significantly. For example, if someone I thought was going to start every game, but suddenly they're not starting, for example, then maybe I have made a mistake. I made a wrong judgment call. But in either case, I would generally be more likely to allow that player a bit more time. So just to confirm whether what I'm seeing is correct, or it was just an one-off thing. So unless it's an injury or something that would definitely keep that player out, or unless it was a pre-planned 1-week punt, I would rarely transfer a player out after 1 game or even 2 games. Most of the time, I would allow them to stay on for 3 or 4 games, or the number of games that I plan to keep them for. For example, you've got a fixture block that you want that player for. Unless circumstances have changed significantly, I would generally keep them. You got to admit that, and I think IPK mentioned earlier, right? FOMO is real. It's very hard to resist. The urge to knee jerk is always there, especially after a really bad game week, or you watch the game, and I think watching that Chelsea game on the weekend, the urge to sell Jackson is there. I think for most people, right? Because he looked bad, Chelsea looked bad, and so it's completely understandable. But for me to help with that, I generally try to classify my moves as either a need move or a want move, and I prioritize the need moves more than the want moves. So with Jackson, do I really need to sell him now? Especially when I have other fires in the team to sort out. For example, I think Chilwell is a bigger fire than Jackson, or if some people have an injured player like Henry, for example, you know that they're completely out, right? Whether Jackson, at least that he's gonna play, or at least for the very near future, he's gonna play. So I don't think I need to. I want to, but I don't think I need to sell him. So generally, after the initial rage of watching how bad he was and how bad Chelsea were against Bournemouth, I think similar to you, I will most likely keeping him because I still see good fixtures that I bought him for. He still looked involved. He got some decent games. The Luton game he was decent. I think the Forest game he was decent, but the Bournemouth game he was poor. So you got a couple of decent performance and a poor performance. The points weren't there, but not all performance was bad. I mean, he's probably a raw player, which I think we kind of knew. But if he keep getting big chances, then I think the circumstances haven't changed significantly, and the good fixtures are still there. Now, obviously, if he gets a yellow card against Villa and then get a suspension, then he becomes a need to sell next week, which I'm happy to do because then it's an easy switch to like a Morris, Carlton Morris, for example, for that double game week. So generally, only when I have or my team is in a very good shape, and I have a luxury move to make, then I will look, to see what one moves I want to make. But I would always prioritize need moves first. So I think Lucian may have mentioned it the other week. Think about the liabilities in your team, right, and try to sort them out first. They are the need moves. Whereas removing Jackson now is more one move. And obviously, a lot of people want Alvarez. One. That's the key word here. They want Alvarez. I want Alvarez, but I don't think I can add to him easily. So I don't think I'll be making that move.
Yeah, I'm thinking like Chilwell's the bigger one for me. Like I could easily go Chilwell to Estepinian for this game week. Rather, he's got Bournemouth at home, Estepinian, right? I don't need to get rid of Jackson. So yeah. So live editing. This was to put Lucian's tactic on here with which he's done in Google Docs. So don't say we don't give you fancy graphics on this channel. Keep it simple, right? We don't need swirly things. You've got a nice background. You don't need fancy that. Look at this pure. I know the N on production. Ironically, the title "Bad Production" has an N on the following line, so I quite like the irony of it being on that one. But so do you want to walk us through your tip-top graphic table of how to get rid of misfiring players? Or
production is about efficiency, and the speed which you put all this out was really, really quick. So hats off to that. Right. So I was looking at this question, right, and I was trying to address the idea of what a misfiring player is. And I looked at it and I went like, this guy sucks because of this reason. This guy sucks. I want him gone because of a completely different reason. And I go, hold on, that's not fair. So being the categorizer that I was, I decided to look at the most prevalent factor that we want to get rid of things. And it's definitely more than a Marie Kondo thing, right? If it doesn't bring you joy, you sell it. It's really about how we view FPL, at least as a manager, because we tend to marry stats with the eye test, right? And sometimes that you buy a player because of good stats. So if he runs out of good stats, you have the tendency to sell him. Similarly, if you know that if you watch a guy like in using your eye test and you identify him as like the furthest forward player, you buy him because he's the furthest forward. You have to look out for when he's not the furthest forward anymore. So instead, right, I think it's rather obvious that if everything is good about a player, you keep him, and if everything is bad about a player, you sell him. Our dilemmas come from a particular player like Jackson having one good factor and one bad factor. That's where we are, right? The in-between, where we're trying to make a decision on how to sell. And this table here really is about trying to classify players that are in that in-between, right? So the first line itself, the first row, if you have good production, but you have bad finishing, that's pretty much our poster boy right now, Nicholas Jackson, right? He can have all the stats in the world, and he had the good fixtures, and he had all the big chances, but you have to make the goal 3 times bigger in order for him to score. Then you hold him if your heart can take it. Now, I think in terms of the other types of players that we're going to touch on here, I hope that I can provide insight because I cannot pinpoint players for every single category here. So a very good example of good production, but suffering from the eye test. If you are a good player, but you are playing for a bad team that is running bad tactics, you know that you can hold him while his form is good, but you sell him at the first sign of trouble. Case in point, Taiwo Awoniyi. Like Nottingham Forest, right? Burnley, Awoniyi is putting up consistent points. He's the tactical fulcrum of the side, but we know that Forest cannot set teams up to win games. So the moment Forest start losing games, you sell Taiwo Awoniyi. Simple as that, even though he has good fixtures. Now, the case is the opposite when we use the eye test not for tactics, but for roles. Because if you know that you buy somebody that has really good production, but he's not the fulcrum of the team, right? Somebody that isn't Morgan Gibbs-White. Let's say we look at that Forest team and we know that Callum Hudson-Odoi, right? He's coming up with all the big numbers. He's having all the big chances, but he's just not the fulcrum of the team. He's just doing really well in that left wing role. Then you hold on to him for dear life. You milk every single goal and every single assist out of him until he loses that production. Simple as that. So, at least we know now that different factors affect solid players in a certain way. So if I go down the list, right, as long as your player can finish chances, it doesn't matter what his team does, how bad his stats are. You're basically holding on to someone like a Jamie Vardy, right? You don't need a good stats. You don't need a good tactics. He could play for Brendan Rodgers for all I care. But Jamie Vardy will score goals as long as he gets 90 minutes. And just to go further down, right, this is where the eye test really matters. Because if you are part of a team that plays very well tactically, such as Newcastle, Brighton, Aston Villa, right, the European challenging teams that are coming up with something novel, then the question comes down to what happens if you own somebody that has terrible stats. If you own a Brighton player and he has terrible stats like Mitoma this week, right, against Man United. Mitoma had jack squat against Man United. Same with Pascal Gross besides that goal. We're looking at going sideways, having somebody from the same team that will basically benefit. Whereas if you have good tactics, but he cannot finish to save his life, then that's a definite sell. This is the one where I struggle to find case in point, because if I try to pick a player from Newcastle or Aston Villa that has bad finishing, you're probably looking at somebody like Matty Cash, perhaps, because he has good numbers, but you see Matty Cash get into those goal-scoring positions, and he acts like a defender. Coincidentally, the player I have sold this week basically suffer from this syndrome. Ben Chilwell is arguably the most advanced player in this Chelsea system as a striker, but he cannot finish to save his life. And for that reason alone, I have sold him for Kieran Trippier. Then we move on to having good tactics, but bad roles, so to speak. That does not exist in SPL because we will never pick those players up in the first place. These are like supporting midfielders and players that will quietly do well at the side, kind of like Josh Brownhill for Burnley, where he links midfield to attack, and he's tactically sound from Burnley perspective, but, we will never care. We will never care. So the last type of liability, the last type of misfiring player is probably the most intriguing one, because those are usually the eye test gems. A very good example is somebody I sold recently, Yohan Wissa. He was supposed to be number 9 for this Brentford side, right? And I bought him for fixtures. I bought him for traditionally his really good stats that he posted in the first 2 to 3 game weeks, where he was like at the end of literally so many chances, right? The moment I buy him, he blanks against, was it Brighton? And then he blanks with barely any big chances against Newcastle, right? And that was a crap game. I watched that Newcastle 1-0 win, and Brentford performed horribly in their defensive formation. Straight away, I went sell. That was a very decisive sell. So, gems can turn out to be liabilities potentially the moment their production drops. So the other type is if you buy somebody that is in a positionally good situation, but they cannot finish. So could you name somebody that is like the furthest forward player of a team, but he cannot finish to save his life? Ben Chilwell is the first one that comes to mind, but basically any
Watkins.
other, yeah, right? Watkins. So like technically essential, but you just cannot sell him because you don't have a choice. Like there's literally no alternative. So the last type of potential liability is if you are a player in a good role, but you're playing for a bad team. So you think of, let's say, Wolves' Pedro Neto. I know nobody will own Wolves' Pedro Neto right now. So perhaps a more relatable example would be JWP. He's in a fantastic role, and, West Ham just don't play tactics suited for JWP to thrive. I know there was that goal against Man City, but I think everyone would agree that it's a one-off. So with JWP, when do you sell? It all comes down to how you time it with fixtures, and that's how I would end the explanation of my graphic here. You look at all these factors, right? And I think it's about having a mix of players that rely on the eye test for you to sell and players that rely on you to, decisively cut based on production. And how you mix up your team will really determine what kind of manager you are. And I conclude with that.
Yeah, I really like this chart, and you can tell you're a teacher because I've seen these charts when we do rubrics for like speech and oral tests, right? So we have these kind of things where you've got to hit certain boxes and coincide them. But yeah, if you look at your box, your chart that you've made, and if people just go and have a look at something so simple as look at Jackson's shot heat map, look at his average positioning, and look at where he receives passes. He receives passes mainly just outside the 18-yard box. And his shot heat map is then on average between 3 and 6 yards out. Like, if you actually just take a beat, don't just look at the fluff shot that I posted as the picture here. Don't look at the fact that was it over the crossbar or hit the crossbar when he had that Sterling chance. And just take a moment. It was over the bar, right? But he hit the post in the game against Bournemouth as well.
Yeah.
So if you just sort of really look at, like, if he was doing nothing, even if he had the stats, but he was doing nothing in the game that you saw, but he just somehow had some stats, I'd get it. But the guy's getting chances. He's getting in the box. Yes, I know he's hitting it over. Now he's hitting the post. He's getting closer. He's getting closer and closer. Over the bar, hit the post. Next one's going to be a goal, I'm telling you. Right. So let's move on then to matchups. North London Derby is coming this weekend. So as always, we're going to start off with Lucian. We'll be a little bit faster on these ones today because running out of a bit of time. So Lucian, how are you feeling about this matchup?
Well, Arsenal v Spurs is traditionally a high-scoring fixture, right? I think pretty much everyone in the gambling industry treat this as a hidden, the most open secret where you always back both teams to score. I think the real key difference here would be home advantage, because traditionally most derbies hinge on a really controversial red card. And we can always recall Son being sent off and various scuffles being had in London derby. So just as we've talked about for the last few weeks, it's like pretty much every single week there is always going to be a match between top 6 sides, right? And you have to ask yourself, who between Arsenal and Spurs will be the big moment player? Who will be the one that can potentially win a penalty, Madison, or somebody that can draw a foul that will cause a red card that will potentially swing the entire match in their team's favor? Because we've had plenty of those, and I think teams like Newcastle, Brighton, and Aston Villa can potentially join in the fray of classifying it as top 6. Because like even that Newcastle-Liverpool game, right? We had a Liverpool player sent off when a Newcastle player could have been sent off himself. So yeah, this is what we are dealing with. How do you treat a top 6 match, and who do you feel will seize the moment for this derby?
Yeah, it feels like, especially with the North London derby, stats can go out the window, form can go out the window. This is one where, we could go into this game and Spurs could have won 10 on the bounce and Arsenal could have lost 10 on the bounce, and we still wouldn't be sat here saying Spurs are going to smash them 3-0, right? Because that's what happens with derby games. I'm just still not fully convinced by Arsenal. Saka is 6th overall right now, just 10 points behind first place Haaland. So he's ticking along nicely. I know Costa, who asked in the chat about selling him. I just wouldn't. He's just one of those players that you just keep, and he's what Tim was saying earlier about like a want or a need move. You do not need to get rid of him, especially with such high ownership. But with the Gunners, I just don't see an explosive score from them. They're still not a sell or buy team. It's just a hold whatever you're doing. Arsenal are 13th for goals from open play, 8th for XG from open play, 7th for attempts on goal, and 12th for big chances. That big chances one, they had like none the previous weekend, and I think they had none against Nottingham Forest. So the defense, I'd also question how many clean sheets they're going to get over the next 6. I would only maybe think 2 over the next 6. So if you're wildcarding or you're looking at your team, apart from Saka, they're doing all right in the league. I just don't think I'm sold on them. Meanwhile, Spurs are 3rd for goals, top for attempts, 4th for expected goals from open play, but they're 7th for big chances. So they're having a lot of chances, but not necessarily particularly fantastic ones all the time. Defensively, people are enjoying a doggy because of his attacking prowess, but I don't think anyone's holding their breath for any clean sheets. So, speaking specifically about this game, I don't think there's going to be any clean sheets with how attacking Spurs are, and then obviously the quality of Arsenal of what the likes of Saka can do. And I think it's going to hinge a bit on the Porro versus Royale selection, because if it's Porro, that's going to be great for Saka. Even if it's Royale, I think that's going to be good for Saka as well. But Porro is very much an attacking fullback down the right-hand side, or even comes in centrally to make triangles for them to pass it around. And that's when the likes of Sarr will drop back, or Madison can drop back. But if it is Porro, that's going to be even better because he's more of an attacking player. It's worth mentioning as well, the Champions League, right? You've got a fully rested Spurs side who's just come back in the dying embers of the game, 2 late goals to take all 3 points. Richarlison getting a goal and an assist. Son, you see the videos of like the likes of Son running on the pitch. People say, "Oh, it's only Sheffield United." No, it's the mental aspect that means so much for this team, for Spurs. It's the same if it would happen to the likes of Manchester United. Spurs are regarded as like a bottle team, right? A team that mentally can lose games. This was a game that, if this was last season, Spurs would have lost this game 1-0. And the fact that they've come back 2-1 with the new manager and everyone seems to be really buying into the Big Ange philosophy, and they've had a rest. And they're against an Arsenal side who doing all right. They've just done really good in Champions League. Very, very good. But they're still playing more games, right? You've got a fully rested Spurs side. I just predict goals. It's going to be tough to see who's going to win. But if you're looking at an FPL light, the 2 players on your screen, Son and Saka and Madison, they would be the key ones I would be looking at. I wouldn't be looking at any defenders, and I wouldn't be looking anywhere else, even long term. It would just be Son, Madison, and a doggy long term, I think, for me. Thoughts, Tien? Arsenal, Spurs?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of FPL, you're right. It's the attackers that you will probably. I think not many people gonna go and buy them, right? So it's just mainly like basically play whoever you've got. I know there's a lot of wildcards that are currently active, which I think is gonna present a bit of a dilemma for them. As he said, they probably keeping Saka as the only Arsenal cover for now. But for Spurs, because they've got this game and the next game, Liverpool, could be difficult. The dilemma is whether you buy them now, or just go with our Spurs on the wild card and then have a route to one of Madison or Son from Gameweek 8, for example. And it's going to be interesting to see what happened to Son. Well, is he going to play up front again, or is he going to go back to the left and then Richarlison gets back in? I think it'll be quite unfair for Richarlison to not get back in after that stellar performance the other day. So I think Son owners is probably pretty nervous. Looking at this and like how they're going to line up and how he's going to perform going back to the left. But yes, any defenders on either side, people probably gonna bench or sell them. On the wild card, they probably sell them all. Or otherwise, I think most people will bench them. So yeah, I agree. Gonna be goals on both sides. And yeah, depends on who the big moment players turn out to be. I think Saka and Madison are probably the 2 that I think will do well in this game.
Good, that's what I want to hear because I've got those 2 players. All right, so let's go on to Liverpool and West Ham. So Liverpool come back against Wolves. I think anyone saw that writing on the wall when Wolves didn't get more than 1 goal. and West Ham finally broken down by Manchester City. So, Lucian, how are you feeling about this matchup, Liverpool-West Ham?
Well, I think this whole thing about Liverpool coming back is a rather consistent theme now. Liverpool tend to come back stronger in the second half, and I think this is a testament to Klopp's management of games. Not in the sense of how he drums up his players, but how he alternates or how he tweaks his tactics at halftime to get the results that he wants. So the question comes down to number one, how will West Ham punish Liverpool in the opening stages of the game? Because West Ham have shown now that they do not care who they play against. Their strategy is the same, and whether they dominate the ball like they did against Luton or whether they played on the counter as they did against Man City, their strategy remains the same. They have number nines, multiple number nines that can punish defenses that are weak individually. And at the same time, they have JWP that can deliver from set pieces, from a counter attack, and they have playmakers, real subtle playmakers such as Lucas Paqueta that can pull out wide and put in beautiful balls from deep as well. So, yeah, I think to answer this question in terms of how we view things FPL wise, number one, will anybody from West Ham warrant our interest by going strong early on against Liverpool? Number two, how will Liverpool come back? Will they rely on their flanks or will they rely on somebody more central such as Szoboszlai or Darwin Núñez?
Okay. So for this one, we're looking more. It's a bit early for West Ham. So in terms of FPL, I think we're looking for a potential early jump on of some Liverpool assets. For this, I just put last game was a game with two halves, key subs, no finishing from Wolves. But West Ham have that sit back. I mentioned this before. They've got a sit back, give possession away, just don't have possession style of counter attack. And at 1-1 against City, it actually was pretty close, and they had a couple of good chances, and Edison made a couple of good saves. But Man City's Man City, right? They can find a way. They're the best team in Europe right now. But Liverpool aren't that at the moment, and with that soft centre that they've got, everyone was saying before, anyone with half a football brain was saying that they needed a 6, and they didn't sign one. And then they signed Endo, who I don't think is going to be good enough. I mentioned before, even when they signed him, he started top flight football in Europe at 27. He's 30. If he was that good, if he was Liverpool quality, why would they sign him now? He's not, and he's not a 6. He's not a Premier League 6. He's not a top 4 Premier League player 6. And McAllister was a deep line playmaker, and he had no 6 next to him, and he got absolutely destroyed. There is nothing that's good. Can you imagine? You can see it now. A counter attack from West Ham, from a Liverpool corner, and Antonio is going to steamroll down the middle, and no one's going to stop him. I just think it's another game with goals. We don't feel like we're getting clean sheets with Liverpool. I couldn't believe it now that they've gone 16 games unbeaten. It just doesn't feel like it. I don't know why. I can't put my finger on it. It just doesn't feel like Liverpool are on a 16-game unbeaten Premier League run. But they are. And in terms of FPL, I'm still just looking at Salah. I've mentioned it. I've likely going to wildcard sometime around game week 8, and I'm probably going to be looking at fitting Salah in there. Darwin, of course, he's attractive because he comes on. He's one of them that he's good on the stats. You're looking at him in the game. Yeah, he looks a bit raw at times, but you're thinking, happy I've got him. You know, he's Jackson-esque with how many quality chances he gets and spoons them wide or over. But there's too many players up front. You're not trusting clean sheets in defence. There's no midfielders. You look at the forwards. Anyone could play, and it's just not worth it. And for West Ham, it's too early. And a later wild card, JWP, Areola, maybe a cheap defender, yes, but it's too early for that now. Tien, thoughts on this?
You still have Salah, right, Lucian? Yeah, I think some of the people who sort of been holding on to Salah from game week 1 are really happy because I think this is a good time to have him. I would probably guess that he's one of the big reasons why a lot of people activated this wildcard this game week. Now, obviously, there's a Chelsea triple up People just want to get rid of all of them. That's probably one reason. But I think the other main reason is to get Salah. I haven't seen a single wildcard team that doesn't have Salah, which makes sense. I think he's been sort of ticking along. You could argue that that sort of consistent return, is that good enough for 12.5 millions or not? But I mean, points are points, right? So whether it's your 12.5 million return points or your 6.5 million return points, you get points. That's the key thing. And I think it certainly feels like it's a bit early, but on wildcard, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. For this game, Liverpool looks very strong on the zonals as well, through the centre and the right-hand side, which obviously Salah will play a very central role in those areas. So you probably want to think that Diaz and Darwin Núñez will probably come in for this game, so they could potentially benefit from Salah taking a more creative role these days as well. But I don't think anyone would probably want to double up on Liverpool. So just Salah. West Ham, I agree completely with you. Too early. I think game week 10 is more right time to jump on them. But obviously on wildcard, Areola seemed to be the no-brainer as a second goalkeeper. Whoever you pair him with is going to be a great option. And I think JWP is a good fifth midfielder. If you can afford to bench him, or for the harder fixtures. But yeah, otherwise I think game week 10 is a better time to jump on West Ham.
Oh well, I'm just gonna rearrange just a thing, guys, because running out of time and running out of voice. We'll do next week. For the intro questions, we'll do 2 reviews. So we won't review our 4 game week players this week because we need to do our picks. So we'll do next week. We'll review our first 2 picks, and that can be our discussion point. Because I don't think I've got the voice to defend. I don't need to defend because my first pick was Diaby and I brought him in game week 2. But yeah, that can be our discussion next week, and we can review our first 2 picks. I think better. So we'll go into our final game. And it is Luton against Wolves. Eyes on this, with the double game week in mind, and a potential future idea for Wolves if you can find someone to rotate with the likes of Neto, who KC Wolf has mentioned in the chat as a potential 1-week chat. One of those teams that is. Lucian, was it with Onyeini you said about this rotation with Wolves? Do they have a good pair? Is it not Nottingham Forest?
No, Awoni rotates with Eze. It's a Forest Palace rotation. Wolves rotates with West Ham, I believe.
Okay, so if you want to try a JWP / Neto rotation on the wild card, it's cheap, not the worst in the world. But we're looking more at Luton here. So, your matchup thoughts on this, Lucian?
Yes. So I'm gonna refrain from promoting Wolves too much because we're gonna talk about Wolves when we wildcard somewhere in between game weeks 8 to 10. So let's focus on Luton's attack against Wolves' defense. So I think I'm gonna rip the band-aid off and take off my Wolves bias hat for a short while and say that with Wolves, 2 things are consistent: mistakes at the back and potentially bad finishing as usual. So I think investing in a Luton defender, hoping for clean sheets, that is something we have to address directly, right? Because as Kaminski demonstrated so heroically against Fulham last game week, he simply spilled a cross. He spilled a simple cross, and that allowed Carlos Vinicius to tap in. So we gotta ask ourselves: will we see something similar where Luton's back line suffers from that slightly inferior player quality coming to the Premier League, and the Wolves striker will take advantage? Or will you foresee the opposite, where Wolves will fire shots basically straight at Kaminski, similar to how Neil Maupay did it against Bern Leno early in the season? So that's the first question we need to address. The second would be Wolves' mistakes at the back, whether they give the ball away or whether Jose Sa spills across and Liverpool fail to finish. It really comes down to why Wolves are so insistent on playing from the back as well. So this comes down to Luton's counter-pressing, and this is where things get a little bit more mysterious, because prior to this game week, we all thought we had their attack figured out. And then Luton go on and change their entire system. Amari Bell, left centre back, moves up to left wing back. Taidi Chong played left in one game, played right on one game, and then they signed Sambi Lokonga. So now they have a dual pivot, and Taidi Chong is playing the number 10. You have Carlton Morris up front with Adebayo as a front duo at the start of the season. Now Morris is alone. So the question comes down to who, or at least which part of Luton's counter-pressing and directness will take advantage of Wolves' mistakes at the back. And that's where we begin our discussion.
It's interesting that you mention about Bell and Chong, because they are the ones who had the 2 shots on target for Luton in that game against Fulham. Especially Bell, who had that big chance inside the 6-yard box as well. So slight changes for Luton. So Wolves, their stats show them lower mid-table for XG, upper mid-table for chances. So it's showing that they're wasting more chances and the quality. But they've been underperforming since prime Raul Jimenez. It's just not replaced him. He was almost irreplaceable. You know, Pep Guardiola, when Aguero was leaving, right, when they won the title, it's like, we cannot replace him. We cannot. You've not replaced him. You've not replaced him. And it shows. It's massively telling. But we sat here several times, and we sat here in pre-season, and we were like, you know what? Wolves have some good players. They have some good young players. They just need to get one who puts the ball in the back of the net, and you guys will shoot up the table. In terms of Luton, because we're focusing on them with the double game week, even if you take into account they've played 1 game fewer, they are hopelessly adrift at the bottom of the table. Like, it's of all stats and everything, it's bad. They've had 7 shots on target in 4 games, which is strange because they've had 8 big chances. So I'm not too sure what's happened there. Looking at, are they a passing side? How are they on the ball if not having chances? Are they no. 1,128 passes in 5 games. In 4 games. Burnley, who have also played 4 games, have 1,913. They've got the second worst pass completion with 73%. So not only are they way under everyone else with how many times they pass the ball, they're also the second worst with how good they are at passing it. If you were a team that passed it 5,000 times with a 75% success, that's not too bad. But the fact that they're the lowest passers and they're not even good at it means that when they do get hold of the ball and try and pass it, they can't pass it. They're basically doubled by a lower mid-table teams and above them for key stats. They're doubled from the middle. This isn't like City have doubled them. This is like mid-table teams have double the stats of this team. It's bad. This is a pure vibes double game week. I've got the goalkeeper along with 0.2% of the entire game. Look, when I tweeted about it, I spelt his name wrong. I called him like Kaminaki or something like that. And someone had come in saying like, oh, I didn't know he was Japanese. Like, I didn't even know his name. I got him because he's a Luton goalkeeper, because I want a ticket to the raffle, and he's sat on my bench and he's coming in for a double. Morris will probably come in, if not this week, if I do get a defender in, he might be probably in next week still, because I've got money in the bank. I don't need to get him right now. It's pure vibes. And it's 2 bites of the cherry. The fixtures, look, if Luton are ever going to score, if they're ever going to get points, they have to do it in this double game week. If they don't, they could seriously finish like, if you remember Derby County from years gone by, it could be that bad if they don't get anything in this double game week. So that's it. For me, it is absolutely pure vibes from this team. You want to back out of BO, but you say Morris is down the middle, so maybe you've changed your mind. But for me, they're the only 2 I'm looking at. Maybe Bell again if you need it, but all defenders are rubbish at the minute. But yeah, you're going because he's a 90-minute man who's got penalties, and you're just hoping he gets one penalty to score in 2 games. But that's it. There's nothing good about this. I'm sorry, Luton, but it's some of the worst things I think I've seen in an opening 5 game weeks. So Tien, your final thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah, I think once again it's a dilemma. You've got a double game week, and when you got a double game week, you got 2 bites of the cherry, and naturally you won, a ticket to the raffle. But then I also remember tweeting and retweeting multiple times. There are players who disappoint us once a game week, and then there's players who can disappoint us twice in a game week. So a bad player playing twice is just twice as bad. So it's a dilemma. Now I did talk about potentially getting Morris and even Kaminsky as well, and play my bench boost, right? Which is still a possibility, but the biggest downside of that is that it forced me to wildcard in game week 8. There's no other choice. I have to wildcard them straight out. Or alternatively, I can say, well, forget about it. I'm just going to focus on doing my transfers and make good transfers, getting good players, ignore Luton, ignore the double game week. So then I can easily navigate game week 8 and 9 and then wildcard in game week 10, for example, which I think could be a better option. So that's a dilemma I have, and so yeah, I'll be watching this game to see if there's anything that sort of point me to one direction or the other. And once again, I see a dilemma for the wildcarders as well, because they have a decision they have to make now. They can't wait. They have to make it now. Like, do they invest in the double game week players or not? Do they get Morris, or how many Luton players do they want to get, or do they just completely bypass them and focus on setting up the team for the future? And I think that's a dilemma, and that was several reasons why I did not fancy a wildcard this game week at all, because there's just too many 50-50 decisions that you have to make that you are not sure at all. So yeah, I think it's gonna be a decision where you look back, you'll be like, foolish, why did you make that decision? Either way.
Yeah.
Whichever way it goes, you kind of look back and say, why did you make that decision?
It's the double game week. We talked last week about the power of dead ending as well.
I know.
If you wildcarded now, unless if you're going to play with 2 up front and just have Morris as your permanent backup striker because his 90 minutes is fine, but it's fun. We started this show today talking about having fun, right? And you will have fun if you're going to start with a couple. You're not going to probably own them for the rest of the season. If you think about it, you're probably not going to own them again because you're going to wildcard them out unless for some reason they get another, turn their lives around and suddenly they're amazing. Messi fancies are going the Premier League and Luton give him an offer, right? You're not going to have Luton players. It's a double game week. They've got good fixtures. Just a bit of fun. And the power of dead ending is you can go in with a few of them, have a couple bites of the cherry, and get rid of them immediately because it's bad. But it's fun, right? Because it sounds so strange to say, but I'm really happy I've got a goalkeeper or a player in my side with 0.2% ownership. Like, that is a differential. When people come, oh, he's a differential with 22% ownership. It's like, get out. My guy doesn't even have 0.5%. He has half of 0.5%, which is incredible.
Could get a 19-pointer.
That'll be in dreamland. Look, if you get 19 points from Saka and I get 19 points from Kaminsky, who's happier? They're both. It sounds stupid. They're both 19 points. Or any goalkeeper, whoever is the most popular, Edison, right? Who's happier? Me. Same points. Stupid to say, but I am happier because mine is more special than yours. Mine's shiny. Mine's a rare, right? But there you go. So we'll review our initial picks.
Sorry, can I just add one last point?
Yeah, go for it.
The one thing I want to say, watching Luton against Wolves, right? Besides the player ability argument, is that when we pick a Luton player potentially, we should also consider the fact that Burnley too are equally attractive, if not better, and equally lowly owned that can potentially deliver against a Newcastle side tired from Europe. So consider someone like Koleosho or what's his name, the other striker, not Foster. Yeah, Koleosho or Anduni, that's the one, the goal scorer, right? So either of those two could come good in a double game week as well, especially against Luton.
Yeah. He looked really good. He was giving the Forest right back. Was that Montiel, World Cup winner? Nightmares was Zeki Amdouini, right? But Foster's banned.
Yeah, precisely why I mentioned only Koleosho and Amduni, not Foster.
That'd be good. So we'll review our initial picks. It kind of looks like too good, too bad. So our initial picks were Chilwell from Ryan. I was Diaby. TM was Alvarez. Lucian was Jackson. But we'll review that next week along with game weeks 3 to 6 because my voice is dying. But we will give the picks before we go. So this week, Ryan is the defender pick. Tien, do you know what it was?
Yeah, so Ryan picked a defender, and he said he would go Botman, just because Newcastle have good upcoming fixtures, and he reckoned at 4.5, Botman offers great value compared to Trippier.
I'm thinking
that's a fair point.
My move is likely going to be Chilwell to Estupinian or Botman, because I just need it for a couple of games, right? That's the idea, a dead ending, and they've got two good games coming up. I'm midfielder, and a lot of people be looking to sell this guy, but not me. And that is Marcus Rashford. He's my pick for the next 4 game weeks. I think he's going to come back to haunt his many sellers. Lucian's shaking his head. We'll wait and see. But he's got Burnley. He's got Crystal Palace, where he'll be going up against Joel Ward down that right-hand side. He's got Brentford, who is probably the most difficult of the fixtures there. And then he's got Sheffield United. So he's got 2 newly promoted sides, and he's got a match against Ward at right back. So I'm having Marcus Rashford as my 4 game week player pick. Lucian, you are a forward.
I'm shaking my head. The moment I saw Rashford, he got 2 assists against Nottingham Forest and he scored against Arsenal. So that's why I'm shaking my head. So anyway, with forwards, I've decided to keep it simple. I'm just going to go with the fixtures and go on the Tien hype train that started last week and go with Callum Wilson, because how can you deny Sheffield United and Burnley? I mean, my second choice was Rasmus Højlund. So yes, Callum Wilson. And I think if you were on a wildcard and you wanted to replace Jackson and you already own Alvarez and Haaland, then run the 3-4-3 and get Callum Wilson. It's a fantastic, exciting pick, and it still allows you to own double Newcastle defense at the same time. Simple as that. I
have said so many times, I think Wilson is literally with minutes. That's the only thing, though, right? We pick. I think we would all have Wilson. If I said to you, he'd get minutes. He'll get 65 minutes a game. I promise you. 65 minutes every game. Simple yes or no. TM, would you have Wilson in your FPL side?
Yeah, definitely.
Lucian, would you have Wilson in your FPL side? Yeah.
Yeah, alongside the double City forwards, yeah.
Yeah. He's with minutes. He is like the best player in FPL. And he's easily the best value player in FPL. It's just the minutes. So you're looking at the fixtures, even if he gets 20, even if I promised you, how low have I got to go? If I can give you a promise, like he will come on, how low have I got to go before you say no? Because even if I say to you, I promise you a minimum of 30 minutes a game, you potentially could take it. Because he's that good. We're all picking him because he's incredible. And I've said before, I think at the start of the season, it was like if you backtracked 38 game weeks of him being fit to make an entire season, he's like the highest point scorer. He's ridiculous. He's Mr. Consistency, but he's also consistent with his injury record. So, and now with rotation coming out, he's just not a pick for me. This could be one of them where, though, he plays the 2 easy fixtures and bangs and doesn't play the others, but maybe comes on for 10 minutes. Yeah. So we go to the wildcard pick for Tien. So Tien is the wildcard. That means he can choose any player from any position for the next 4 game weeks. Tien, who are you backing?
Kaminsky. No, just kidding.
Yeah,
no, it's
going to
be
clip that, because if he does go on a mad one, you can claim
Kaminsky. Yep. So it's going to be a Newcastle clean swipe or whatever you call it, a triple up. So I'm going for Trippier. So, obviously playing the fixtures, Sheffield United, Burnley, West Ham, and Crystal Palace in the next 4. So really good fixtures for clean sheet as well. I think Newcastle, surprisingly, is still ranked 3rd for defense in terms of XG conceded, despite having faced 4 teams in the top 5 for attacks already. And now they're facing 3 in the bottom 8 for attack. So yeah, I think I'm predicting 2 to 3 clean sheets for them. Now, obviously, you can argue that is he worth the 2 million more than Botman?
Yeah.
I think he is, because he's still by far the best in terms of attacking potentials. Out of all Newcastle players, he's top by far, by a big margin, for chance created, with 12 chance created for successful crosses. And he takes most corners. I think almost all corners he take, and he take free kicks as well, or a lot of free kicks as well. So the attacking upside is there. And we're talking about just the 4 game weeks, right? Or maybe over the whole season, you could argue that maybe Botman offer higher or more value, but I don't care about value. For the 4 game weeks, I want points, and I think I want points coming from clean sheets and attacking returns. So that's why I'm picking Trippier. Now, just as a side note, right? So I already mentioned it, a couple of episodes ago, where I really regret not going for Alvarez, even though he was my game week 2 pick. Since then, I pretty much have gone with my pick. So I've gone with Diaz as my defender pick. I actually bought him. I've gone with Sterling as my midfielder pick. I've got him. So now my dilemma for this game week is whether I go with my last week pick, which is Wilson, or this week pick, Trippier. I'm pretty sure it's going to be one of them. So it really depends, as I mentioned earlier in the episode, right? It's which player do I want to get rid of between Chilwell and Jackson. And I
just do
think
both
based
for
on our
-4,
discussion,
man. Do both
no,
for
I'm
-4.
not. I'm not doing -4. I'm not doing -4. Actually, I know I did think about. I thought about the -4 for. But then I wanted Alvarez, which means that I would need to sell Diaz, because just to free up the Man City's players. But then the more I think about it, the more I think it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. So it'll be either Wilson in for Jackson or Trippier in for Chilwell. And I think currently I'm leaning Chilwell to Trippier.
Yeah, we've chosen them a lot.
It's gonna trust. Yeah, I'm just gonna trust my picks.
Yep. This is where it gets interesting as well, wildcarders, when they've wildcarded, because most people now would probably double or triple up on Newcastle after a lot of people not having them, because their good fixture run starts right now. Whereas in game week 8, there's not as many left, so you might only have maybe just one. So this is definitely a time to jump on Newcastle. And I'm looking back at our previous picks, and you can just see like we overlap quite a lot with the likes of Jackson, Trippier, Wilson. So we're all sort of backing similar players at times. But now's the time. I was too early with Isaac in game week 4, I think. And I was Trippier last week myself. But yeah, 3 out of 4 are Newcastle, and it's really difficult to not say that. And your point you said about the teams that they face, that's exactly what I said in the matchup last week, when it was Newcastle Brentford. They're like next to each other in all of like the defensive and attacking stats, especially the defensive ones. But you looked at the first 4 games that Brentford had and the first 4 games that Newcastle had, and they were next to each other on the table, but Newcastle's fixtures were so difficult and Brentford's was a lot easier, right? Now they get the good ones. It's just rotation. That's the only thing that's going to worry. But they don't have the defenders to rotate. So if you've not got the money, Trippier could get rotated for Livramento. It's true at some point. But the left backs, the centre backs, and the goalkeeper are probably not going to get rotated. So that's just one negative I would say about Trippier is you could see him get rested against Sheffield United or Burnley to give Livramento his sort of first start.
Can I add one final point, one anecdotal point before we move on to captaincy?
Yes.
Just one last point. Okay, so guys, I don't know how many people are left on the stream watching, right? But I'm pretty sure everyone is in this scenario now. I'm pretty sure that everyone is in a group of friends where individually everybody makes their own transfers and everyone makes their own decision, and we are not excluded from this list, right? Ryan, Tien, Rob, and myself, we make picks every week. And this, we will probably have multiple groups, whether be it by a WhatsApp or school or whatever it is, whatever community we have. And there will always be this one guy that has the Midas touch. And the lesson here is to really follow the lead and pick the guy that is on fire with his picks. I have to eat humble pie and admit that a lot of what I'm doing is watching what Tien does, because his Alvarez pick made me a yes. Ryan's Foden pick put me on a big yes, and I regret buying Foden. Now, with Tien recommending Trippier, I've actually bought Trippier before this, I've already mentioned. But guys, look at who is making the right process and the right decisions in your WhatsApp group, so that you follow the leader and follow the guy with the Midas touch until he runs out. And that's the beautiful thing about our channel, Play Your Way. Because all 4 of us have independent processes, and when one of us catches fire, in this case, Tien, in the first 4 game weeks, just follow what he does until one of us others in the group catches fire, and then go with that.
Yeah, I think Tien's 4 out of 4, right? Alvarez, Diaz. Oh no, Diaz had a clean sheet, but they keep conceding goals, but he's still a good pick. Sterling and Wilson. So far, so good. Expect points. No pressure, but if Trippier doesn't get a double-digit haul and we all bring him in, we're going to be giving you grief in the group chat. Just going to point that out.
We keep receipts, and I think just one final point we move, and I think this is a really good point. I really like this process because we document, right? We document these picks, why we pick them, we review them after 4 weeks. Whether the things we predict were correct or not, it's not too much about the points, but the things that we predict them, the reason why we pick them, we review them, and I think I might just do that for my actual transfers as well. So I'll probably start creating like a Twitter, I don't know, thread or something where I would say this guy make this transfer. 4 weeks later, I will review it. I think it's a really good process for anyone to do, because I don't think, Lucien was absolutely spot on early on. I don't think we do it enough, and I think it's a really good process to do, to evaluate and fine tune your process, which is all we can do.
It's key because we're doing it with players we don't own. It's like practice. But when you do make a transfer, do you know what I mean? Like we're practicing our moves with our picks, and then so for example, Tien's hitting pretty much every week, right? So whatever he's doing with his analysis, when he goes to make a transfer, he's on a roll because he picked, he analyzed, he compared, he did all this. I choose this guy, worked out. Goes to the next week, follows it, it's worked out. So he's doing something right with it. So the next time you make a transfer, you've practiced with the other picks that you didn't bring in, but now you're going to bring in a player you've picked and you've got history. It's kind of like an extra match practice for FPL transfers by picking these players but not having them. So, and it stops you being focused just on the players you have and expanding to look at other people as well.
And one final thing, like the reason why we pick one pick as well is it's similar to only one free transfer we have, right? Like, unlike some other channels where every week they pick like 15 players, right? Obviously if you pick 15 players and some of them gonna hit, and then when you review it's like, oh well, I've picked these players and they hit. I was like, well, yeah, but you pick other 14 players that didn't hit and you chose to not to talk
And we
about
also
them. We
split the
only have one
positions.
pick. Yeah, and then we are forced to think a bit more about why we pick certain player, because it's not easy. There's a lot of players that we could pick, but choosing one, and yeah, you gotta be responsible and be accountable for the reasons why we pick them 4 weeks later. So
And
I
it
think
is,
it's really good.
and it is
I
for
enjoying
4
the challenge.
weeks. It's for we talked earlier about holding players for a certain amount of time, right? So it's not just I'm going to choose whoever's against Luton this week, and then next week I'm going to choose another guy who's against Luton. We have to choose a player that lasts for 4 weeks, pretending it's our free transfer, right? So yeah, it works out. Captaincy, guys, I'm just going to say Haaland before we go. Does anyone else have anything different for captain this week? Are you tempted by Salah, Lucian?
What? Why? What? Who does Liverpool play? What? Nah.
West Ham.
Not, captaincy is not part of any conversation under City play Arsenal in game week 8.
Agree.
Okay.
And Haaland is due. I think he's missed. I think he's missed enough big chances in the last 2 games, including the Champions League game, to be so angry that he's gonna put, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 past Forest.
Wasn't it like the most amount of XG in a single game since Opta began?
Something like that.
And this is excluding the potential tap-in he could have stolen from Bernardo Silva.
That's true, yeah.
Unbelievable. Like, I watched it and I thought, if whoever captained Maddison and Son, they didn't, Haaland got a goal and big red arrow because I didn't get anything. But you were lucky. You were so lucky if you didn't captain Haaland this week. This wasn't a situation where he's scored 2 penalties and Maddison had some good chances. No, you got so lucky that he did not destroy people's seasons for some people. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys. So next week we'll review 2 weeks worth of picks, and we'll be doing matchups and stuff. Follow us all on our individual handles here on Twitter below us, posting all our content and things like that. You can catch Teacher, I think, sometimes on Net the Hall. Is that every week or just sometimes, Lucian?
No, it's every week. Every game week, 24 hours after the final game.
Okay. And Tien will be telling everyone on Twitter about his game week picks now because he's doing so well, so he can post that.
Gonna do it.
Yep.
Gonna do it.
Just keep retweet it every day, repost it every day, and it'll be a dream. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys, and good luck this game week. Chill out. Don't beat yourself up if it don't work out. And everything will be all right. This too shall pass. There you go. We can finish on that. Take care, guys, and have a good one. Bye-bye.